Well, it seems such a short time since I was talking to Pat McGart. In fact, it seems no more than 2 days. I must be losing my sense of time. Is that right, Pat? Was it 2 days?
Well, because it was 2 days ago. That's
So,
remember due to technical difficulties at my end, we rather than Friday we did Saturday. So here we are on Monday morning against what about 36 hours, dude.
so when I get the day of the week right, that's the maxim. Even a stop clock tells the right time twice a day.
We're one up when
Okay.
you get the day right.
With all sorts of goodies today. Amazing. I was thinking, Pat, on when there's such a short time between our blogs, our vlogs, I think we'll not have enough stuff. But I mean, I think we've far more than we need here. But anyway, we'll start with a very interesting one. Was it in today's Irish Times or was it somewhere else? You saw David Williams' observation about trade north and south?
Have you the quote in front of you, Jude? Doesn't matter.
I have. He said, whether the loyal brotherhood like it or not, the economies of the north and its much larger cousin, the south, are integrating slowly but surely. This will continue because it makes commercial sense. There's just one word I would disagree with him on that. One word.
What's that?
And that's the word slowly.
Yeah, you got.
You have strong feelings on the Pat.
You do. No, Jude, I don't think it wasn't this morning. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, but I only came across it at the weekend, and I don't know where it was published. I don't think it was a column for the Irish Times. I think it was for some economic institute or something he was speaking at, and he made the point that the reality is kicking in, that that the north and the south are becoming more integrated for a whole lot of reasons, Jude. Jude, know the way he's simple anecdotal things. During the COVID, the end of COVID, me and my dear wife went up to Draperstown, and you have to go through the forest and the mountains and the mountain roads. And Jude, I was up there and I saw a lorry with a Tipperary registration dropping off, I think it was wood products to a farmyard. Said, good God, I've never seen that before. A lorry from the deep south doing commercial sort of deliveries. And it struck me, wait a minute, we're getting far more integrated than I ever thought we were. Now, Draperstown, I'm a Donegal man, and Draperstown's a sort of a bit off the beaten trail for me. And I thought, if they're coming all the way from deep south, there's many other things I've seen now. Lorries, I've been in even nearly sort of semi-loyalist areas and seen Southern Irish registered lorries, and I'm going, the trade levels are way up. And Jude, apparently, if you check out the Central Statistics Office, the trade has, in the last, say, 5-10 years, has increased immensely. So,
it has, but I think it's more recent than the 5 to 10 years. I think it's since Brexit. In February, I checked a few figures. February 2022, John Campbell, you know that little chap on the BBC
guy, the economics
he reported that Northern Ireland, trade of Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland was worth almost €5 billion in the first 10 months of 2021. First 10 months was worth $5 billion. Imports to Northern Ireland from the south in the first 10 months of 2020 was $2.7 billion. Imports from Northern Ireland to the south increased in the first 4 months of 2021 by 60%. That's what I'm saying. I disagree with him on the thing of slowly. I think the thing is just hit warp speed because of Brexit. Who is going to consult their principals if they're running a business and they say, by shipping this, not shipping, but sending this north or sending this south and doing a deal is going to really help my business? Who's going to say, oh, no, that's against my principles, I won't do it, I'll send it somewhere really difficult and I'll make far less money on it? Not a chance. Not a chance. People know.
Apparently, there are 30,000 people per day crossing the border in this region. I presume that's maybe up as far as Drogheda and Dundalk as well.
Yeah.
But and there's a simple example. There's a place quite literally about 4 or 5 miles from where I am sitting now called E&I Engineering. It's changed its name recently. They employ about 900 people there, maybe 1,000. and I'd say 70-80% of them are from the Derry region and maybe Limavady. You know, and right, Jude, if any time, I live on the main Letterkenny Derry route, and see in the morning, the number of cars with Northern registers heading towards Letterkenny, phenomenal. And the number of cars with Southern registrations heading towards Derry, equally so. Jude, the days of sort of the Derry and Donegal being like at the border was like an Atlantic Ocean shutting everybody off. Those days are well gone.
Well, I think since the border was opened, since they took down the big military installations and so on and passed a Good Friday Agreement, Derry was the natural sort of link up with Donegal, the natural sort of capital of Donegal. But as my point is that since Brexit, and since the placing, doing the terrible thing of having the border in the Irish Sea, the trade in Ireland has absolutely mushroomed north and south. And it's been very, very good.
Absolutely.
So it's a case of people deciding, are they going to allow their economics to overwhelm their never sense? And I actually think there's very few businessmen of whatever stripe who are going to say, "Oh, my principles won't allow me to use this obvious."
I'm singling out individual firms, but I noticed I think Linus, I think they're called Food Distribution Group, LYNAS, and they're from the north. I think it might have been based around Coleraine or Ballycastle, somewhere like that. I really don't know. But anyway, I noticed now I've seen quite a few times there are lorries on the road here, Northern registered. I've seen Tesco's and all these Northern registered vans delivering stuff right, left, and center. And have you noticed? I noticed a lot of the work now being done on roads and waterworks are done by Northern contractors. Dude, it's cross border and stuff all the way now, and there's and as you said rightly, Jude, I am not if I'm a Northern unionist and I have a business and I've got a big contract down south, am I going to turn down that on political principle? Ah, my hell, it's a business comes first.
Yeah, there's also quite a trade. I noticed during the Troubles, people I knew, people related to me even, we'd go down to them in Dublin and chat with them and have fun and so on. And yet they very, very rarely came north of the border. There just was a reluctance. They had bought this thing off the streets drenched in blood, explosions right, left, and center. And they never quite squared this in their own minds with the fact that we were living there all the time. But once the Good Friday Agreement was signed, there's not just a steady trickle, there's a steady rushing stream of people coming to, of all places, Belfast. If I was a tourist, Belfast is one of the last places I'd come to, but there you go. They love it. They love the Titanic experience.
Paddy Wagon. If you're in Belfast, you'll see Paddy Wagon, the green vans parked outside various hotels and so on. Right. And those are bringing tourists from the south, north. And the guys, I thought he was very brave going with, a sort of a leprechaun on the side of his bus and calling it the Paddy Wagon and taking people's, and it was almost, but anyway, well, I think he got a couple of his buses burned out in the early days, but now they're such a part of the scenery, plus the fact that they're bringing serious amount of numbers of tourism and bringing wealth and so on. I think they're more than welcome these days. But Jude, Belfast is buzzing when you go up, and the number of southern cars and the number of southern people staying in Belfast is phenomenal. Jude, I know the old joke about Belfast was the first prize was a week in Belfast, the second prize is 2 weeks. That day's gone.
Yes, that certainly is. I suppose it increases my sympathy for the DUP because they really are, they're pushing against what most unionists, most thoughtful unionists are thinking. Which is,
Jude.
I want to be able to go up and down, and I want to have my holidays in Killarney. I want to do trade with Cavan, whatever, And yet the DUP is clinging to this as for dear life. The trouble is, they're right. You see, if they let go, they're allowing even more integration. If they hang on, they're flying in the face of the economic integration that's happening. It's a tough one, and I have no sympathy for them. Yeah, what were we going to say?
Remember George Osborne, the former Tory Chancellor
Yeah,
under David Cameron? Remember his famous one that Northern Ireland's centre of economic interest will increasingly become more orientated towards Dublin than London. He said that, and because of the EU, and he said the politics will eventually follow.
that's right. That's right. We have their hearts and minds. We have them. No, we have them by the shirt and curlies. Their hearts and minds will follow.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
let's leave that topic. I'm sounding very gloating, but I don't mean to. I just feel that people who are trying to put a block on what is happening naturally and is going to happen inevitably, it just doesn't seem to me to make sense. Anyway, let's come to the south, because not everything in the south is rosy, you know, Pat. No pun intended. Dublin, for example, is a very unsafe city, as you've pointed out to me. And there was 2 attacks over the last couple of days, not a couple of days, a couple of weeks. Very recently, there was an American tourist. He simply was set upon by, I don't know, it was a group of guys, and they've injured him to the point where he's going to carry these for life if he survives.
Yeah.
And there was another mugging, I think, of a Ukrainian actor coming out of the Abbey Theatre. He just attacked him. So what do you see as being the answer to that?
Jude, the American guy is 57 years old, and apparently he's lost an eye, and he will need serious facial reconstruction if he survives. He's still, as far as I remember from this morning, he's still in a critical condition now. And there seems to, Jude, when I lived in Dublin for a very short time in the 1980s, and drugs were just coming in that time, and I remember Dublin city centre never felt that safe to me. It really didn't. And now, what seems to have happened is the number of Garda have declined considerably. The drug problem has increased considerably. Homelessness has increased considerably. Addiction services are overwhelmed. It's almost Jude, here's the problem, I think. Roughly 1/3 of the population of the Republic of Ireland lives in and around that Greater Dublin area. And I think it's become sort of overrun to a certain extent. Now, Dublin's probably no more violent than maybe any other cities, but there's always this preponderance or this thought, or whatever you like to call it, that there's a randomness on the events. And Jude, there's a street whose name I can't. It's about 400 meters from Pierce Road, or the Pierce Street Garda station, and the Garda want to close it off at night because it's so dangerous. Jude, what sort of message is that sending out?
Yeah.
And by the way, why should the authorities be closing off streets? Why don't they be cleaning it up? Why don't they get patrols down there and sort of arrest the little thugs that are hanging around there?
Well, that's the choice that you have. You either attack the problem or you close off the problem, put barriers so people aren't affected too much by it. You were talking about Dublin and the number of people who are living in Dublin and how yet this street is so dangerous. It's not just the people who live close to Dublin or in Dublin. I think it's everybody in Ireland. I mean, I feel very proud of Dublin as the capital city of Ireland. And the thought that the main thoroughfare, which is quite beautiful, actually, if you stop to think about it. It's really quite a stunningly wide, generous sort of a street. The thought that that's been taken over by thugs is appalling. There's an article, as it happens, Pat, this very morning by Una Mullally in the Irish Times, and she's talking about this. And she says, first of all, that the idea of Garda numbers being short is absurd. It is ridiculous. I agree. It's ridiculous. If there are more Garda needed in the main thoroughfare of the capital city, they simply should be put there. And that's it. The government, any government that would say, oh, no, we can't afford them or whatever, ridiculous. Put in the number that's needed. But she goes on beyond that, and I think she's right. She says, these crimes, the things that happen, don't just happen out of the blue. It's got to do with, it's not just simply the product of, but it has to do with the environment. If you have a street which is run down, if you have a street where shops are either cheap shops or empty shops, if you have streets that are dirty, if you don't have public seating, that creates an atmosphere which encourages this kind of feral behavior. So she says that that's the way that it should be tackled. She blames politicians because she says Helen McEntee, for example, who apparently is responsible for this, her response to this latest attack was, "Oh, we are piloting local community safety partnerships." Mullally points out that that was created 2 years ago and has had apparently no effect whatsoever. So I feel ashamed. I do honestly believe she's onto something about atmosphere. We used to be quite a thing about this in when I was in Canada, about how did you create a welcoming atmosphere for people when they come into a school? And it's true. You're immediately hit by what's right in front of you. If it seems sort of respectful or joyous or whatever, you take on that same mood. If it looks dreary and run down, you take on that mood as well. So I think she's right that if the street was made a vibrant place, if the streets were clean, if the shops were burgeoning and worth going into, the place would improve. There just has to be a concerted focus on it in a number of directions. I'm sorry to go on about this so much, but from when I was a kid, I loved going to O'Connell Street. I remember getting ice cream in it when I was about 7. And God, I felt so thrilled, looking at this big street and then the river at the end of Connell Bridge at the other end. And the guy taking photographs.
I remember him. He was a famous guy, but the thing, that it seems to be that the government, it's always reactionary. They always react to something rather than proactive. The other thing, Jude, you mentioned it in passing there, the number of Garda. Now, Jude, as usual, I'm not up to speed in the numbers, but apparently there's something like 200 Garda less now than there was about a decade ago. That in Dublin, that's the first thing. Number of when during the recession they closed down a number of stations as well, or amalgamated them. There's very little Garda presence on the streets. And the other thing, Jude, apparently there quite recently, they were looking for Gardaí to go to Templemore to train, and they couldn't get the numbers. Now, I think they launched a bit of a campaign and maybe increased the pay or something like that, and I think they might be succeeding now. But for some time, they couldn't get people to join the Gardaí. So that's an issue as well.
I was just going to say that, do you think it was because they were afraid something might happen to them, or was it that they weren't going to get sufficient pay? I think it's more likely to be the second of the two. But, except you get Garda, and I don't see the answer to this as being, get these thugs, get some Garda in there and give them a couple of belts of a baton and put them for people for a while. That response it's kind of understandable when you hear about those terrible injuries people suffered. But you can see how, O'Connell Street is not very far from Grafton Street. But I don't know anybody that feels unsafe walking down Grafton Street. So, it's got to do with the kind of support that the people who are in the street get. We shouldn't just sort of say these are feral, savage brutes and we'll just let them go. There must be something made them that. There must be something that encouraged them to act in that way, which is brutal and horrible, I agree. But in a sense, it's our responsibility too, or the government's responsibility, as well as the responsibility of the people ultimately themselves who engaged in this kind of ghastly attack. But anyway, it's an interesting one. And certainly the very idea that tourists would hear about this, and they will hear about it, they'll think twice, or they'll want to know, they'll want a very reliable guide to Dublin, where to go, where not to go.
And where it's safe. And that's you shouldn't be any place in a so-called Western democracy, a civilized society. People shouldn't be getting warnings. Oh, you can't go there. Like it's going to end up like some sort of these sort of feral areas of Louisiana or somewhere like that. Where you don't go out at night. Like Detroit or whatever.
Yeah, but it's got, of course, a lot of it. The guy so many problems comes back to poverty. The guys attacking are unlikely to be, studying for a master's part-time.
No, exactly. Unfortunately.
Okay, let's go on to the next one here. This is an interesting one. You draw my attention to. I saw it a couple of weeks ago. The Falkland Islands, as our British masters tell us, there's word that they are going to be changed The Isles Malvinas is what the Argentinians are going to call it. And I think, is it the EU that passed that law or something?
It was really the EU issued an official communique a couple of weeks back, where I think they might have, but they give it a joint name. Now, as far as I remember, the thing was sponsored by Argentina, but the EU give it official recognition as the Islas Malvinas. And the Brits, of course, went bananas about this, that the EU was sort of siding with the Argentinians. And Rishi Sunak said it was a very unfortunate choice of words, and it should have been whatever. He said, and a Downing Street spokesman pointed out that the people of the Falkland Islands had democratically voted by an overwhelming majority, something like the usual Russian result, 99.9% voted for it, to remain British, and that should be respected, etc., etc., etc. That what the hell, Britain has control of an island that's what 5,000-6,000 miles away from it, and etc., etc., and it's beside Argentinian territory. You sort of ask yourself. Anyway, that's a political and geopolitical issue. But anyway, bottom line is the Brits didn't like it. I thought it was quite funny that the EU got themselves embroiled in something by referring to an island that by its proper Argentinian or whatever type.
Yeah, and which, as you say, is just offshore from Argentina. There's a temptation to say this is a load of nonsense. Like, what difference is it what people call it? The Isles Malvinas won't make it any less the Falklands or British or whatever. Yeah. Shakespeare's that's what's in a name, rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Yeah. Yes and no. Yes and no. For example, one of the things unionists here complain a lot about is that nationalist people are so antagonistic to the state they won't even call it by its name. And it's something I have to confess I don't do. I never have willingly, have once done it. I didn't do it willingly, refer to Derry as Londonderry. And I very rarely refer to Northern Ireland. And in fact, I'd like to think I've begun to popularize, instead of writing N-I, if people would write N-E-I, because it really is a more accurate geographical description. But it is true, if you put a name on something, it is saying something about how you regard it. And the Brits, by calling them the Falklands, very clearly are saying, this is our territory. And the Argentinians, by having it referred to as Isles Malvinas, are saying, this is more naturally ours. It's kind of funny. It's sort of ridiculous. I'm surprised that the Argentines and the Brits haven't decades ago sorted this out. And maybe it's to do with the fact that Argentina isn't as powerful as China. Because when China said, you guys get out of Hong Kong, the Brits. There was no sending a flotilla of ships to take back control, was there? That's for sure. I remember whenever the Falklands thing was happening, or the Isles Malvinas was happening, when they sent Maggie Thatcher sent the troop ships. A colleague of mine in the University of Ulster, an Englishman, I suggested that the whole thing was ridiculous, but he said, "Oh well, if you let this go, what's going to go next? Hong Kong." A couple of years later,
he was still right.
So he was more wise than he thought he was. Okay, so much for far off islands and naming things. You think you asked the question, but I suspect you know the answer, Pat. You asked the question of me this morning: is hurling the best game in the world? Do you think it is?
Jude, I heard somebody. I was watching it. I know Jude, I saw the last 20 minutes yesterday of the All-Ireland final. It was superb, and it's a superb spectacle. I've never played hurling, so I don't know. But one of the guys, I can't even remember now which one of them was, said, without question, when it's played like this, it's the best game in the world. And I thought, was that a wee bit sort of parochial, us Irish sort of saying a game only we play, and well, the shinty's another version of it, but it's not quite the same, and so on. No, but I was watching it, Jude, and it is a fantastic spectacle. It's seriously fast. And I am told by those who know that the level of skill required to be a good hurler is unbelievable. You need superb, absolutely super hand-to-eye coordination. And when you see some of these guys going up in the air and catching a wee small ball and hitting it 50 yards as accurately and all the rest of it, and it's no right, Jude. But it was the guy who said it was the best game in the world struck me and saying, no, can we say that, or is just our own wee pride saying again that we play is the best in the world?
I think there's a mixture of the both. I watched the last part of it, most of the second half. I had been told that Kilkenny had led at half time, and I was pleased with that because they used to have a manager. They had a rather older manager, and he seemed such a nice guy.
Brian Cody.
Yeah, he did such wonderful things for them. But apparently he's moved on now, so somebody else replaced him. But I was sort of rooting for Kilkenny. But I had to admire the skill of those Limerick guys. The skill with which they can take a long puck of the ball and put it over the bar. Just incredible. It's also incredible, as you say, when they can catch a ball that's coming out of the sky and has been hit from, maybe, I don't know what, 70 yards away.
70 yards,
But, like you, I never played it as a kid. And the first time I must have been about 12 or 13 before I saw a hurley stick. And I remember thinking it's a pretty fearsome weapon, that. And I often thought, how do the guys not get their hands mashed to pieces? And at the time, when I was a young guy, there was no helmets, no protective gear of any kind. So, yeah, I admire it. To be honest, I'm not from a hurling tradition, and I don't warm to it the way I will to the All-Ireland football final next week. But obviously, there's 80,000 people from Munster and beyond who disagree strongly with me. I know my brother-in-law, without asking, he was glued to it. There's a strong tradition of hurling about Antrim. In fact, Antrim invariably produces the best team in Ulster. But the trouble is they tend to get whacked by the guys down south. But I remember going into what's it called? North Antrim School, Ballycastle, going into a school, and it was lunchtime, and the kids, boys and girls, all had the way young fellas kick a ball around the schoolyard. There, everybody had a hurley, girls and boys, and they were doing that exactly at, there was no game on. They were just knocking the ball around. And I remember being kind of amazed by that. So there is a dedicated small number. The great thing about it, I suppose, is that it is a genuine centuries-old Irish game, unlike, I suppose, Gaelic football. But on the other hand, I'm sorry, I'll never love it as much as I would love Gaelic football.
Yeah.
Okay, have we thrashed that one? Have we solved that problem?
I know. You were right. What do you call it? Castle. What do you call it? Glen, and Antrim. If you go into wee villages up in the middle of Antrim, you'll see on the walls, you'll see hurling icons on the wall of the pubs. Big murals, and you're going. And I remember going through some of those wee villages up in the mountains and the glens of Antrim. And you just go, these wee boys are walking the street with their hurleys the same way as, and maybe we were walking the streets of England, somebody would be kicking a ball or a cricket ball. Hurling is a way of life, Jude. By the way, see, when you go down south, a couple of years ago, we stayed down on the borders, Tipperary and Waterford. And I remember those people, they lived, breathed hurling. It was fanatical, absolutely fanatical. And, it was just a way of life for them.
I'm surprised. Well, I suppose that one of the difficulties they have is not a good game for television. It's hard for me anyway. I find it difficult to follow the ball. It's so small compared to what I'm used to. So that may be a reason why it hasn't actually succeeded even further than it has. Mind you, there was over 80,000 people at that game on a really wet. It's supposed to be
it's supposed to be the fastest game in the world, Jude.
Oh well, that's what they say. Ice hockey. I would have said it was faster than ice hockey, actually, but there you go. It's pretty impressive, the thing that sort of intrigues me is, how is it that they have these pockets in Antrim where the game flourishes, and yet all around it, you have the rest of the 6 counties, there's not very much hurling at all. There's a bit of hurling in Derry now. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Where's the Irish language in a place I think the remoter the place, like West Donegal and North Donegal, the Irish language stayed there because the foreigner didn't get in there. You had to go over, climb over mountains, and there was no roads and so on. So the language stayed there. I think way up in the Glens of Antrim, the hurling, soccer didn't get in there because that was what the game the people played.
And then that tradition maintained. Somebody was telling me that what they do with some of the kids or clubs even, they'll have the kids brought down and hosted by some really good hurling county in the south, in Munster.
Yeah,
and that they'll spend a fortnight and they'll be learning skills and seeing a standard that just doesn't exist where they are. I think that's a brilliant idea. I'm just surprised that Antrim has never made the breakthrough. You'd think at some point.
Well, they got close enough a couple of times, Jude. They've beaten some of the southern counties, so they're doing not too bad.
Yeah, I'd like to see them in an All-Ireland. Okay, move from hurling to the fastest game in the world to the most beautiful song in the world. You've posed the question to me.
Last night I was listening to Highland Radio, and an American singer called Vince Gill came on and he sang Danny Boy. And I remember the thought came to me a couple of years back. Geez, June, I'm talking 30 years ago. I got into a discussion with a colleague in journalism, and he asked me what was my all-time favorite song, and I said Danny Boy, and he went, "Geez, you're joking," And anyway, I was actually talking then sometime afterwards to a lecturer, a guy from the University of Ulster, and we were just chatting about the whole idea of Danny Boy and the history and all the rest. And he says, "Pat, if you sit down," he says, "there are many interpretations of the song, what you wanted to make. But he says, if you think that it's a mother talking, it's a dead mother talking to a son who has emigrated, he says, it plays in your mind." And that one minute, he put that thought into my head. Jude, when you think about it, it's a very profound song. And it also could be a what do you call it? A wife who's died and her husband's coming back. But I think Tom Jones said it was the most beautiful song in the world. So the question I wanted to ask what for you as a song, it sort of strikes a chord?
Well, that one does strike a chord. Of course, that's the Londonderry Air. That's the tune of it. I think it's a wonderful tune. And the lyrics of Danny Boy are very good too. I suppose I find it a little bit tinted whenever your man, the boxer,
Barry McGuigan,
instead of playing the national anthem, despite the fact he was from South, he played Danny Boy and all. We were all as grand. We all agree on Danny Boy. That sort of soured it a wee bit for me. But it is a beautifully plaintive tune, and the words are very moving. I must say, my mind always, I never even thought about it, but I assumed that it was a pair of lovers. You have obviously a more wholesome mind than me. I assumed it was sexual partners or people who hope someday be sexual partners.
But you see, as Shakespeare, somebody said, "Hey, look, well, let's be honest. He didn't mean half the things people took out of his work, but he'll willingly take credit for them." He says, "Danny Boy, you can interpret it several ways," but he says, and that's the genius of the song. And he says, look at it the other way. He says, the way it struck so much of a chord is because of the fact that he says you can interpret it, and if you think about it, because of immigration in Ireland, that a mother's dead, our son's coming back, and you can see when you read the words, it actually fits perfectly.
Yeah, there's a poignancy there, all right. Well, you asked me the question, Pat, so I'm afraid I have to answer it for you. You asked me what do I consider the most beautiful song? Well, it's a hard thing to say. It's kind of like saying what's the most beautiful woman you've ever seen, what's the most beautiful painting you've ever seen,
and so on. It's subjective.
Subjective, of course. Well, I'll tell you, a song that I think is sort of beautiful, and the words are beautiful, and I hate when other words are put onto it, is that song that Cat Stevens used to sing, "Morning Has Broken."
Absolutely.
I think the lyrics of that are so beautiful. He talks about the wet garden in the morning and the bird song as if the first bird that ever sang was singing now.
Yeah.
Oh, it just knocks me out. Mind you, there's some people...
that album, remember Cat Stevens's Tea for the Tillerman? My brother bought it and I had never really heard it. And there's about 10 songs in that album that were just simply brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I think that one's the top of them. Now, he didn't write that, I gather. Somebody else wrote.
No, it's a hymn, isn't it?
Is it a hymn? Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah, I think
gorgeous.
so.
It
No,
is
I'm looking at it.
gorgeous. If
Yeah,
only I tell you,
yeah.
a lot more people would go to church if all the songs that were sung
If the
was
music was like
nice
that,
as
yeah,
that.
absolutely. Yeah.
But there's two
Um,
others that get to me, Pat. One is, and I don't know, it's not as a song. I've heard Brendan Behan sing it in Irish, but I just love the air of it. Is the Cullen? You know that song,
beautiful.
Cullen?
Absolutely beautiful.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
so Irish. Every note of it,
Uh,
every little musical phrase of it is so
absolutely.
steeped in
Uh,
Irishness.
mm.
And the third one, and I mentioned this one to you before, is anyway, as Rita Connolly sings it, is it the Deer's Cry?
Yeah.
As she
I've
sings
heard
that.
that one as well.
Now, I'm sure other people could murder it, but she sings it superbly. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, I've heard so many people murder the town I love so well that I can't stand the song anymore.
well,
Jesus, Jude.
I don't think I
I've
would
heard
want.
so many. Like the minute now somebody starts singing, I'm reaching for a nice pick to put in the back of their head.
Isn't that terrible? You know, because I like I like Phil Coulter. I remember him with St. Columns, but
Uh,
no, it's it's cliched really, and it's sort of like very Phil. He's walking the line between saying these people shouldn't be here and at the same time sympathy with the people who are suffering the invasion. You know, he's a
yes,
careful
that
walker.
fine line that
Careful
so many
walker.
Irish people walk.
Okay, Pat. That's it for
Okay,
another
Jude.
week. See you on Friday.
Uh,
Enjoy your week.
See you on Friday,
Okay.
Jude.
Thank
Right.
you.
See you
Thank you.
Friday.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.